Okay, Wednesday night, September 23rd. Mosseri Teshuvah. Yom Kippur is this coming Sunday night. And I'd like to, of course, have a class related to Yom Kippurim. To pick one specific topic that is not a major topic, it's very hard to create a topic because we've done Kal Nidre in the past and we've examined many aspects of it. And that's really one of the main points of Yom Kippur. And I'd like to look at, if possible, when we'll have more of a session where we can talk, where we could all be unmuted, rather, and we could all talk and discuss various aspects of the prayer and the minhagim that lead up to Kippur and go on the night of Kippur, the day of Kippur, and pull out sources as needed, if needed, to try to understand them better. There are some things that I think are very, very important to try to address. I would say the first one being the night of Kippur and how the Arbit differs than every other Arbit of the year, specifically in how Arbit starts throughout the year, whether it's a weekday, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's a holiday. We always have some sort of Pisukim or a Mizmor, followed by Hasi Kaddish, Vehu Rahum, and Barechu. Kippur comes, that doesn't exist. There's no Pisukim, there's no Mizmor, there's no Hasi Kaddish. Automatically, Vehu Rahum and Barechu. And Barry Miz, you're there. I'm glad you're there. I'm going to attack the Iraqis a little bit. Okay, we'll get to that. That's one item I want to discuss. Another item I would like to discuss is in the morning, the recitation or omission of the beracha of Sha'asali Kol Sorki or Sorkai or Serachai, depending on how you say it. And what is done among the different Sephardim, when, why, how, etc. Another item I would like to touch upon, if possible, is Seder Aboda and how people possibly fall on the floor, don't fall on the floor, when, where, how, etc. These are the three things that are in my head. I didn't have a chance to develop any of them the way I would like to, or to prepare source sheets, coming out of Rosh Hashanah, jumping into Kippur with so much more going on and all the COVID scenarios that we're dealing with. It makes it difficult to prepare everything the way I would like to, so I apologize for that. But I would definitely want to touch upon these three things. I also want to hear from all of you what Kippur issues are things that you think about or things that you find difficult to grasp. So let's start with that. I'd like to hear from all of you first. Let's go one at a time. David, I put it in your hands to, decide who's going to speak first. Let's hear what we're talking about, and then we could try to start the class based upon what everybody is interested in talking about or what everybody's interested in learning about. So David Batesh, please take
Rabbi Kasola, please, first.
All right, Rabbi Kasola, Chabod.
Thank you very much. I love your topics, Joey, Rabbeinu, but I am bedeviled by the choice of haftarot for shacharit and mincha.
Interesting.
I don't understand. The whole theme of the haftarah of Yeshaya is, what are you doing here? Why are you fasting? Is this what Hashem wants? And the whole theme of Yonah is, what are you doing here? Go out and influence the world. And the whole thrust of Kippur for everyone is to come to the knis, come to the synagogue, and stay there for 25 hours and look at each other and feel the inuyim. But the haftarot say just the opposite. So that's something that has always bedeviled me. And the second thing is, are we allowed to prolong the shofar to make it after Arbit, especially in synagogues where people are very what's the word? Very itchy to get out. Can we do the shofar after Arbit? Can we do Arbit before the shofar? Those are the things that, besides what you raised, those are the issues that bother me on Kippur.
Interesting. I've never ever thought about the haftarot questions that you've raised, and they are definitely excellent. Really, something that I hope I can find an answer for while we're speaking. But will it do it justice? Al regular hat? I don't think so. But I love the question. As far as the shofar and arbit, I think we can easily tackle that, God willing. Okay, great. Who's next?
Nisim Cohen.
Nisim Cohen, please.
So, I heard today that in Israel they're closing the shuls.
Yes, they are
Yom
closing the
Kippur.
Batei Knesiyot, not the shuls, the Batei Knesiyot, yes.
Batei Knesiyot, the knesses, they're closing them for Yom Kippur.
Well, they're not, that's not exactly true. The government is not closing them. There are different guidelines in place, and it's Rabbi David Yosef who said maybe the only way to deal with the situation is by everybody closing and staying home so we could try to really nip this in the bud.
Right.
That's what I understood from everything I saw and read and heard.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. But again, so not everybody agreed with him. But I guess the question is, in this situation, is that something we should be considering as well?
Definitely something we should be considering, but considering so many factors of what goes on here, I don't think that'll ever happen because we've yet to see the rabbis, rise up to the top and open their mouths about anything or take a position of leadership as to what needs to be done and to carry it through in a uniform fashion. All right, let's go. What else? Or who's next? Either way.
Well, the rest of us are on the chat, so I think you could start. Unless you have questions, guys.
Barry, anything? Elhad, if anything?
No, I mean, nothing really pressing comes to my mind. I mean, it's a very long set of prayers. And, one of the things I struggle with, because my Hebrew's far from anywhere where it should be, is just understanding a lot of the new prayers that we read. So I spend a lot of my time reading it in English, since I have the English translation of the Hebrew, which I feel speaks to me more, obviously, than just reading Hebrew words that I don't understand. But other than that, I don't really have any. I'd have to look at the Mosseri, which I have not done in an entire year, to really start conjuring up good questions. To be quite honest, beyond that.
Okay, but considering that you've looked at the same Mahzor year after year for the last, at least 45 years, you should be somewhat familiar with what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar. All
right.
Yeah.
No, okay, not a problem.
Yeah.
Got you. Is Halif still here or he left us?
I'm still here.
Okay, and you, Mr. Seattle, you always like to, say something about Seattle and shamble everybody else. So what do you have?
No, not in the mood tonight.
Not tonight. Okay.
I don't, any reservations or problems. I can't really think of any right now. I think it's truly a beracha that we have every year to have this, the day of Kippur, to give ourselves and our communities a chance to, better ourselves and look forward to the upcoming year, set goals for ourselves, and being thankful to Borei Olam for giving us life for a new year.
For sure.
Yeah, and the I don't know. The issue I come up with is what I've raised to you on more than one occasion is why the Halabiya Nosach is so different from everybody else's, and that's something that I think I would love to study the history over time as to how that developed and how many parts are left out, certain parts are added. Vidui Hagadol is said in every prayer, which I think they are the only community to do so. And maybe not for tonight, but maybe for another time we could do that.
So you do have to keep in mind that the community of Aleppo, Syria, is a very old, ancient, stubborn community. Stubborn in the sense that even though it was a major trading post, they were very, very stubborn in holding on to their ways. It was always a very, very religious community. And as such, they had very, very old, ancient traditions, many of which they were able to hold on to, and others that they were not able to hold on to. And once the exiles from Spain showed up, they had to give in. So you have both factors working over there. You have the things that they follow, like Sefer Adim, and things that...
You lost your video.
Yeah, I know you lost the video, because I'm copying some text for you. Is that okay?
No problem.
All right. Just want to make sure. So because it's a very ancient community, it has a lot to offer us. It offers a lot as far as the history of the Jewish liturgy is something that we learn a lot from the Aleppo community, and we get to see what they held on to, in comparison to their old Mahzor Aram Soba, which they published specifically because they saw things were falling to the wayside because of the Spanish exiles that were arriving there. So you have to consider all these things. It's a fantastic community with amazing minhagim, and even though not everybody may agree with it or like their customs or why they're different than others, the point stands nonetheless that it's a source of study for rabbis, for hazanim, for professors, and what have you throughout the world over the course of decades and if not centuries. So I think it's very, very important, and that they were part of a living community of such a tradition is also very, very important. And we'll leave it at that for now. Let us now look at sources for tonight. We'll try to look at, I want to deal with the Sha'asali sorki thing first. I think, to me, it's one of the most pressing issues because it's something that's been attacked, in my mind, so much over the last decade or so. And as you know, when these type of things get attacked and people start changing the minhagim because they don't like what's going on, I don't mind if somebody wants to change something for themselves, but once they want to change it for all the, for the entire community or communities of, of Sephardim, wherever they may be, that's when it bothers me. So I just sent on the class chat source material on Sha'asali sorki. I don't know if you all got it yet or not. If you could all access it, please let me know. Okay. So we've studied from the book Debrei Shalom Ve'emet before. I don't know if any of you here have it or not. This is from volume 4. And volume 4 is the first or the only volume where he really deals with Yom Kippur issues. And so he's dealing here with this beracha on page 74. En mebarchin biyom kippurim sha'asa li kol sorki. So he's saying we do not make this beracha. He's referring to the North African communities because as we know, that was tilt, and that's what he deals with. And he starts. In his usual style, he has to quote from Yalkut Yosef or one of the Yosef family of books and take it from there. So here's his quote. כתוב בספר ילקוט יוסף, חלק א', הלכות ברכות השחר. יש נוהגים שביום הכיפורים ותשעה באב אין מברכים ברכת שעשה לי כל sorki. Okay? Saying there is a custom, or some have a custom, of not making that beracha on those 2 days. שנתקנה על לבישת נעליים, because it was established for the wearing of shoes. ובימים אלו אסורים בנעילת הסנדל. And in these days of Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, it's forbidden to wear sandals. In other words, leather shoes. לכן אין מקום לברך ברכה זו. And therefore, as such, there is no place to make such a ברכה. אולם, יש אומרים שצריך לברך ברכה זו גם בימים אלו. But there are those that say otherwise. שעל מנהגו של עולם הוא מברך. Because he is making the ברכה based upon the normal habit of the world to wear, to wear footwear. בעוד שרגילים לנעול נעליים שאינם של עור. And because we wear, something on our feet, even if it's not made of leather. שמותרים גם בימים אלה. That is permissible on these days. וגם יש נועלים נעליים של עור במוסרי יום כיפורים, מוסרי תשעה באב, עם סדר כוכבים. There are those at the end of the day, okay, after the stars come out, they put on leather shoes. לפיכך, המברכים יש להם על מה שיסמוכו. I'm sorry? לפיכך, המברכים Hello? יש להם על מה שיסמוכו. Those who make beracha have sources upon which to rely. ומכל מקום שב ואל תעשה עדיף. Better not to. שספק ברכות להכיר. Now that's what it says in Yalkut Yosef. Now Yalkut Yosef was written earlier than Chacham Omer Yosef's Yabi'a Omer, volume 9. And in volume 9, Siman Het, Chacham Omer has a teshuvah on this subject where he basically comes out and he says we must stop this custom of not making the beracha on those 2 days. And this beracha needs to be said. And then his last line of the teshuvah, he says, and in any case, my custom is to make the beracha of sha'asa li kol sorki on Yom Kippur on Tisha B'Av. Now, of course, as we've shown in previous classes, once Chacham Omer Yosef says something like that, what do you think happens? Chacham Omer Yosef says it. So, of course, I have to say it too. Take everything that we've known from our fathers, from our grandfathers, from our hachamim, from anybody else, toss it out the window. Because Chacham Omer Yosef said, that's what we need to do. It's very, very difficult to accept such a thing. Granted, with all his knowledge and all his understanding, do it for yourself. But why come and eradicate it from everybody else? And these, like I said, this is something that always bothers me. So let's look at his source work over here from the B'nai Shalom Ve'emet and see where he goes. Now, obviously, he wrote 3-4 pages. He has something to say. So we're on the bottom, number 6. If you see, you'll see it on the right-hand side towards the bottom. It says 6. كتبנו بنדון בקיצור נמרץ בספר בני שלום ואמת כרך א' עמוד 45 והנה באנו להרחיב בנושא כאן. But I discussed this topic briefly in volume 1, but now I'm going to expand on it. And we really don't need to, trouble ourselves with what he wrote in volume 1 because whatever he said over there, he deals with over here in much more detail.
Joey, who's the author?
I'm sorry?
Who wrote this?
The Bnei Shalom Ve'emet is written by Rabbi Shlomo Toledano. Okay? Okay, I guess. So, it's 4 volumes. First of all, this Rabbi Shlomo Toledano has written a lot of articles, a lot of investigative work on various aspects of halacha and manhag. But these 4 volumes of the Bnei Shalom Ve'emet, he really comes to town attacking Yalkut Yosef mainly and trying to readdress customs that were followed in various communities, mainly in the North African communities, but they're also adhered to by other communities. And he shows us that the Yosef family doesn't always adhere to what they say. They don't always adhere to Maran, Maran, Maran. In fact, he puts together a whole list showing how they go against Maran numerous times, whereas the North African communities do adhere to Maran. He deals with the concept where people think that the North Africans were influenced by Ashkenazim and do everything like Ashkenazim, and he proves otherwise, showing that there are ancient sources before the influence of Muram and the more later day Ashkenazim, and he shows the early Sephardic Rishonim that take those positions, and he shows how the Iraqi Jews were very heavily influenced by Ashkenazim, and they changed many of the Sephardic halachot and minhagim based upon Ashkenazi sources. And what is done today among Sephardim in Israel is based upon the Iraqis, which is against Maran, which against the Sephardi Rishonim and Aharonim. It's a very, very interesting set of work, interesting set of halachot and minhagim that's to be shalom ve'emet. And we've learned a lot from it over the course of the last number of years. And anyway,
this reminds me, Joey, of that Sidur that you and I were talking about, the Tunisian Sidur.
Sidur Od Abinu Hai, okay, is a Libyan Sidur based mainly upon the writings of Rabbi Ya'qub Raqqah, who was the rabbi in Tripoli until approximately 1880. Another great Hacham. I don't know if they're similar, but they both stand for the same thing, which is our minhagim have tremendous sources, and there is no reason to eradicate our minhagim because the Rishon LeZion says otherwise. That's really what it's about. And in Israel, it's a major problem because it's always the Yosef family against mainly the North Africans. Now, the Libyans are technically part of the North Africans, but each community has its own unique customs and its own hachamim that relied upon. And you have to give credence to these groups, especially if they have their own synagogues. You can't tell everybody to go and change their minhagim. You have a synagogue following a certain custom. Let them continue with it. I see no problem with it. You can't say that this is the land of Maran. This is the land of Rabbi Yosef Karo, and in the land of Rabbi Yosef Karo, you could only follow him. Before he came along, it was the land of Ben Moshe Bar Maimun. Everybody in Eretz Israel followed Rambam. So why did that change? So again, once you have a separate synagogue, separate communities, separate Batei Din, everything changes. And everybody can do their own thing. It makes it confusing for others, but at least you get to uphold things. Let's try to read something.
Isn't there another classic example of saying Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo?
Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo is another class that we need to deal with. And I have material that we could have 3 classes on it. Easily 3 classes. It will never end. Okay, we could keep going on and on about it. And this was definitely the minhag of all Sephardim. And I mean each and every Sephardic community. There was no Sephardic community that did not say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo on every barakah. That includes barakot that you fulfill your obligation, whether it's Shofar, Megillah, or anything else. But nowadays it's taboo. If you do it, you're looked at like you're apikoros. So again, that's another class that hopefully we'll get to one day. All right, now let's try this. המחלוקת. הדבר שנוי במחלוקת בין הרמב"ם לבין בעל העיטור שחי בפרובנס במאה הי"ב. So he's telling you, bottom line, this goes back to a argument between the Rambam and Baal HaItur, who lived in Provence in the 12th century. The Rambam's ruling, שאין לברך שעשה לי פה סורקי ביום הכיפורים בתשעה באב. Okay? מפני שאסור בנעילת הסנדל. Now, we have to look at that in Harambam, and we'll come back to that in a minute. בניגוד לו, כתב בעל העיטור, ואי כאמן דאמר דאינו מברך על כלי ידיים ביום הכיפורים ובתשעה באב, ואינו מברך שעה סליק כל סורקים, פני שעשו בני הסנדל, מסתברה כיוון דבידו וברשותו הם לעולם, כגון פני סכנת עקרב, מותר, ויכול לברך כסדר כל השנה, כל בעל העיטור comes and says, you know, there is an opinion, there are those that say that a person does not make this beracha of Antat Yadayim on Yom Kippur on Tisha B'Av, and he doesn't make the beracha of Sha'a Sadiq or Sorki on Yom Kippurim and Tisha B'Av because he's forbidden to wear shoes. Or in the case of the Yadayim, you can't really fully wash your hand. But now he was dealing with the issue of Sha'a Sadiq or Sorki because you cannot wear shoes. Okay, and based upon reasoning, Kevan, since that he has that ability and he has the permissibility to wear shoes. For example, if he knows he's going to have to walk in an area where there are scorpions, okay, it is then permissible to wear leather shoes even on Tisha B'Av, even on Yom Kippur, or let's say if you're going to be walking in an area of Goyim, okay, and the Goyim are going to make fun of you because you're not wearing regular normal shoes like everybody else, and you're going to be made fun of, you're also allowed, okay, on Tisha B'Av and Kippur to wear leather shoes on that pathway. Or you're in an area where the road is all rocky and you're going to hurt your feet if you don't wear leather shoes. You're going to cut up your feet. You're also allowed. Halakha is very clear. You're allowed until you get to where you have to be, and then you remove your shoes once you arrive at your destination. Okay, and so since you have that ability and you can put on leather shoes, okay, therefore, therefore he should be able to make the beracha as if it was any other day of the year. So this is the difference between Rambam and Baal HaItur. Okay? I just want to open up on Rambam for a second. I just want to double check something in the Rambam's exact language. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we just saw the introduction and what Rabbi Toledano is calling the mahloket, and I have a problem with it. Because Rabbi Toledano here is unfortunately misquoting Hanambam. Okay, and it's a major problem. And I realized that as soon as I read it. And like I said, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to prepare for class. I usually try to prepare at least, major sections of it, and I didn't have a chance at all today. Listen to Harambam, okay? It's fascinating, and I don't know how and why he made such a mistake in misquoting this. So Harambam is saying in Hilchot Tefillah, Perek Shibi'i Halacha Het, tells you Kesad, how? Lan Bichsuto, okay? He lies down to sleep wearing his clothing. Eno mebarech kishe'omed malbish arumim. When he gets up, he does not say the beracha of malbish arumim because he slept in his clothing. He gets up, he's still wearing his clothing, so he does not make the beracha of malbish arumim. Then he writes, halach yahef. He walked barefoot. Eno mebarech she'asa likul serachai. There's a period. Then he writes, B'yom Kippurim u'b'tish'a b'av, she'en sham re'chisa, eno mebarech al tilat yadayim, ve'lo hama'a b'shina. Okay? So he's only talking about Yom Kippurim and Tish'a b'av as far as washing. Harambam does not deal with this issue of leather shoes or barefoot or anything on these 2 days whatsoever. So we're coming to study from a source, and the source is already faulty. So we need to keep that in mind as we move forward, and we're going to look for the origin of this mahloket. But the mahloket, or the difference of opinion, or the different reasoning and logic, definitely does not go back to Harambam in the 12th century. Okay? Any questions about this point or any insight on this?
Could you just elaborate on how he misread it? How Rabbi Toledano misread the source?
So I'll tell you what I think. There are many faulty versions of Harambam on the market, many of which have been out there already for hundreds of years. And my guess is that he was using one of those versions. Okay? I have such a version here, but it's buried behind so many books because obviously I don't use that text anymore. I personally use the one from Mif'al Mishneh Torah. Okay, I find this to be a one-volume, extremely accurate text of the entire Rambam Mishneh Torah, all in one volume. And it's very, very unfortunate that he's bringing us a misquotation. But now, since you asked that, I'm going to look up something else quickly. There is something called Sidur Harambam. And this Sidur Harambam was put out by a group of Yemenite Talmidei Hachamim. I think it was really one guy, but he doesn't want you to know who he is. He writes in the name of a group of people. But it's based upon very accurate texts of Harambam and many, many manuscripts. Yemenite manuscripts as well as manuscripts from various libraries throughout the world. I want to see if he has any note on this beracha. Nothing. Not even a note on it. Now I'll look in the Kippur section, but I believe also over there he does not mention anything about not saying it because, again, this is not something that's to be attributed to Harambam whatsoever.
But didn't you just read in his text that you do not say the beracha on those 2 days?
No, that's not what I said. You didn't listen then, David.
Okay.
You did not listen at all. All Harambam said was on those 2 days, since you do not wash your hands, you do not make the beracha on Yadayim. Harambam said anytime you walk barefoot, you do not make the beracha of Sha'asa Likusarachai. He did not single out Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av. And here, in this same Sidur Harambam, Shahrit Yom Kippurim, okay? Birkat al-Shahar, Birkat al-Torah, B'Sha'ar al-Seder Shaharihen Mufiya La'ayr. In other words, do everything as usual, okay? B'Yom Kippurim, she'en sham rehisa, en u'barich al yadayim velo ha'ma'abir shena. That's it. Nothing about Sha'asa li kol serachai. I'm saying kol serachai because that's the way Harambam refers to it. As kol serachai, and that's the way the Yemenites refer to it as kol serachai.
Why not Hama'avir?
I didn't read that source, so I'm going to go back and find it.
Yeah. You mentioned Malbish Arumim before, but
Maybe showing you something again. You weren't listening, David.
no.
I don't mean to tell you if you sleep with your clothing on.
Correct, but you didn't say anything about Hama'avir. So this said not saying Hama'avir also.
I didn't read it to you from Harambam. Had nothing to do with this, with our topic. That's why I didn't read it to you. Here we go. Below Hama'avir Shena. والفي شو أسور it doesn't tell us the reasoning down here. We'd have to look in the in the Mosseri of Harambam, but it doesn't give us the reason for Hama'abir Shina. Okay, but in the footnote he does mention about Na'ilat al-Sandal, but not from Harambam. He says based upon Maharis. Maharis is what we call Rabbi Yahya Saleh, okay, which is major hakam for the Yemenites. In his Tikkelal Ais Hayim, it's called, mentions it over there. Okay? That's it. But I'm not going to open up the Tikkelal now to see what's going on. So, let's try to continue. Now let's see those who are of the opinion that you have to make such a beracha. لا حلونان فسوه تشوبوت الجئوني ما حدا شول أيدير بي سمحاء عمانوئيل بكتوبهم بسمان كفتيش مبرخيم شعاسة ليكو sorki بتشعب آبي مكبوريم أفضل بي شئين شمن عيدات السندال. So you're saying recently was published Teshuvot Geonim Hadashot. In other words, newly found Teshuvot of the Geonim. Okay, and he's telling you over here, Ofek Institute put it out, and you're saying there's a Teshuvah over there, and it says over there that you make the beracha of Sha'asali on these 2 days, even though you don't wear sandals, leather shoes. דעתו של בעל העיתור לקוחה אם כמגאון. ויש להעיר כי כובע זה מכיל גם תשובו מהחכמי פרובנס הקדמונים, וכלל כובע זה קשור למנהג פרובנס. Saying that this obviously proves that the opinion and the reasoning of Baal Aitur was not his alone, but it goes back to the earlier rabbis of Provence, because many of the things in this volume of Teshuvot, as they call it, Teshuvot HaGeonim HaDashot, and this now proves that it's not from the Geonim whatsoever, but from the Hachamim of Provence. But in any case, many of the things here have to do with the rabbis of Provence, and that's where that custom is coming from. Now, Baal Shibuleh HaLekit, Hebi Etcheteh De'od Beli Le'achriya B'nehem. Okay. About Harosh, maybe Debre HaRambam, Debre Baal Aitur, Behu Maskim and Baal Aitur. The Rosh brings both opinions, what they're attributing to Harambam, and I'm saying it's a faulty opinion of Harambam, in my, the way I'm reading it, and the words of the Baal Aitur, and the Rosh agrees with Baal Aitur. Gam HaRitba, Dohay Debre Harambam. The Ritba also brushes aside Harambam. Gam Benu Yeruham, Benu, we know, was quoted left and right by Maran in the Beit Yosef. There's no halacha without Benu Yeruham. Maybe Debre Harambam, Ach Mesayim, Veroba Poskim, Hiskimu Shemibarech. So even though he quotes Harambam, so obviously they all have this faulty text of Harambam, and even though he says Roba Poskim, Hiskimu Shemibarech. Gam Tur, maybe it Baal Aitur Posek Kamo. Now the Tur, like his father, the Rosh, says we make the beracha. Gam Beno David Aboda. Hebi Dat Harambam, Vesiyem Verob Mefarshim, Hiskimu Shebarech. So Abu Darham also says, no, we still make the beracha. וכן כתב הראש דכיוון דבידו ברשותו הם לעולם כגון פני סכנת עקרב מותר יכול לברך כסדר קודש לכולה. So the Rosh says exactly what we read earlier from the Baal Aitur, that since this is something that you can do if needed, so you make the beracha as usual. ולאו דווקא כסיים מסניה. Okay? כי הכי דלא שמע כל תלנגון ברך מפני שבידו היה. Same way you would make a beracha on hearing a rooster, okay? You didn't hear it, but you could have heard it. Same type of thing. كم سفر إيجور لبيع دعاتوش الباع عيتور كتاب باع عيتور إيه كمان ده أما شيئين برخيم يوم كبورين عن ذا يدام شعاسيت لي كوسر كاي كيف أن شاسو بسندام من تلا مستبارا كيف أن بيدو بشتوها بلد من عيه وشو سكرت أقراب يأخذ بريخ. Same thing, same exact thing. Okay, now قام ربي شمعون برسمح دورام. Okay, the رشبيس كتاب ولا تشبيس rather. أبال ماش كتاب هراب meaning the Rambam شبيوم كيبورين شعباب شئين شم رحيصا إم برخير عن يدايم بزيل لون الأود دباراف كيلال شين أسور إلا رحيصا تعانوك أبال فلا حيال في يداب إذا قرأ ما أوديك لأكبير بني ربوش أو بين المايم عاد سفروا يخش كنا لأكبير بني الشيخين. So now, until now, we've been dealing with the concept of do you make a beracha of sha'asali? Because you can technically do this action if need be. nobody commented upon not making beracha until yadayim. So Rabbi Shimon bar Sei Mahduran says, I'm sorry, I disagree with Harambam. It makes no sense. It's not asur to wash on these 2 days. Only it's asur to wash any sort of washing of enjoyment. And since you still have to wash for tefillah, the same way it would be permissible to go greet your hacham on these days, and to do so, you could even walk through water up until your neck. That's how wet you could get. Basically, you're bathing practically. Like bil pinei rabbo. So all the more so now, you have, at the very least, you can wash your hand for tefillah, like bil pinei shekhinah, to go greet the shekhinah, to go greet Borei Olam, to go pray to Hashem. And so therefore, there is a washing that is mutar on Yom Kippurim and Tisha B'Av, and therefore we make the beracha of Adi Tilat Yadayim. And this is the Tashbis saying this. וכן ברכת שעשה לי כל sorki שכתב הרב שאין מברכים לפי שאסור בנעילת הסנדל לא נראו דבריו שהרי אינו אסור אלא בסנדל של עור אם רוצה לנעול סנדל של שעם הרשות בידו ועליו הוא מברך. If the guy didn't want to wear a leather shoe, a leather sandal, and he wore a wood sandal or a cork sandal in this case, okay, he could do that. He could wear it, and he's now wearing acceptable footwear, and he would make the beracha of sha'asa li kol sorki. If that's the case, you make the beracha. Gam b'shelut shuvot abkat rochel. This is the responsa of Maran. Rabbi Yosef Karo has a book of responsa called Abkat Rochel. Mubat teshubah shel Rabbi Yosef ben Sayyah. There's a teshubah there from Rabbi Yosef ben Sayyah. Uba katub. ואף אם יהיה הרמב"ם רב בגלילות הללו היינו בדבר שנהגו כמותו אך לא במה שלא נהגו כמותו. Okay, even if the Rambam is the rabbi in this area, in this region, okay, we follow things, they always follow like him. But something they don't follow like him, they don't follow. The practice is not like Harambam. כמו שלא נהגו בגלילותינו במולייתה כמותו. Okay, now what's the case of the muliyata? Okay, what's the stuffed item that he's talking about? I don't know, so I can't comment on that. And in the order of recitation of the berachot in the morning, the bet knesset, or in the case of the beracha of the milah, when the din is doing the milah and not the father. Okay, or in the cases of these two berachot, okay, on these 2 days, and even with the case of making the beracha of malbish arumim, even if they slept in their clothing, there are things that even in this area, that everything they follow Harambam, it's not everything, it's certain things they follow Harambam, and certain things, nonetheless, they do not follow Harambam, even though this is the arena of Harambam. And these are just examples of some of the things, okay? And this is somebody talking in the days of Maran, to Maran, telling him that there are things that we don't follow Harambam, even though we follow Harambam. Okay, so there's no such thing as cut and dry. We follow Rabbi ABC or Hacham Aleph Bet Gimel, and we do everything like him blindly. There's no such thing. It never existed any place. Okay, so once again, to prove to you that somebody tells you, comes Maran, but of course not. It doesn't exist.
Isn't that a big Joey? Isn't that a big? I mean, I don't know what to say, Ashkenaz, or that, you have to pick a rabbi, and whatever the rabbi says, that's the way you go.
So, the topic of Aseh Lecharab is a different topic altogether. I'm going to try to just summarize it very, very quickly, and it's not doing justice to it and really doesn't answer the questions. But let's think about it like this. Here you are. You have a village. you have a town, you have a small city, and there is it's a one rabbi town, okay? The rabbi may have some other hachamim working alongside him, but for the most part, he is the rabbi of this, I don't know, let's call it a village. I like the term village over here. So Aseh Lecharab, the people of this village appointed themselves a rabbi over them. Everything that this hacham tells them, that's what they do. He is the guy to lead them, to guide them, to direct them, to teach them. That's the Aseh Lecharab. You have to understand, the scenario that we have today where synagogues have rabbis, that never existed in history. There was no such thing. Okay? It was always the metropolis had the rabbi, okay, or had the bit din. And they would then appoint hachamim from the bit din to help out people in different neighborhoods, what have you, or the people would gravitate to the bit din or to the chief rabbi to ask, depending on how things were set up. Yes, some areas where only the chief rabbi, would answer issues of halakha, and other areas where he would allow the hachamim alongside him to answer questions of halakha as well. So every locale had its own uniqueness. This Aseh Lecharab, make yourself a rabbi, okay, only existed when you were in a small area with one rabbi. Once you put yourself in an area, with hundreds of rabbis, there's no such thing anymore. And what Aseh Lecharab means within the context, within the context of Pirkei Avot, obviously there's many mefarshim on that. And to me, my favorite explanation is Rabbeinu David HaNagid. Rabbeinu David HaNagid is the grandson of Harambam. Harambam had a son, Rabbeinu Abraham. Rabbeinu Abraham had a son, Rabbi David HaNagid. And Rabbi HaNagid explains in his Perush on Pirkei Avot, Aseh Lecharab. What's the point of Aseh Lecharab? Aseh Lecharab, you have to pick somebody either from the school of Bet Shammai or somebody from the school of Bet Hillel. Otherwise, you're going to be confused all the time. You have to pick one school of thought. It doesn't mean pick one guy, but one school of thought, one methodology, one way of approaching the halakha. Okay? And it makes a lot more sense that way. Now, like I said, I'm just scratching the surface over here. It's not really part of where we're going. Okay? I hope I somewhat answered your question. Okay. Okay. So we just finished reading Rabbi Yosef ben Sayyah. Now, continue. Rabbi Yosef ben Sayyah. Okay? علا ليروشلايم מדמשק בשנת 1518. Okay? So now 500 years ago, there was this Hacham, Rabbi Yosef ben Sayyah, who lived in Damascus, and he made Aliyah, he moved to Jerusalem. הוא היה שייך לחכמי העדה המוסתרבי. He was one of the Hachamim of the Mustarab community. Mustarab, as we know, are the native indigenous Jews that predated the coming of the Spanish exiles. Exactly like I just said. And as we know, the Mustarabi community generally followed the path of Harambam. And as we see in other Teshuvot and Abkat Rochel. And he, in fact, has given us testimony, 500-year-old testimony of the Mustalab community. So that means the testimony really is talking about a practice that predates 500 years ago, that even on those days of Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, they made this beracha. So it seems that this faulty text of Harambam is something that has been around for a good 500 years as well, because they're all commenting on it as if it was Harambam's ruling. So we know 20th century Jerba, great Hacham Rabbi Moshe Chalfon Kohen, Katab in Brit Kehuna. Brit Kehuna is a compilation of the Minhagim of the island of Jerba. Shaf Alpi שהחידה נמשך אחר דברי הארי, אנן בדינן כימרן כדברי הרדב"ז, שבכל מקום שהפוסקים והמקובלים חולקים, הלכה כהפוסקים, כך אנו מברכים שעה צדיק וסורקי אף בתשעה באב יום כיפורים. Now this is a crucial statement that everybody needs to listen to and understand. And then we could see if it really holds true later on. But he's saying that even though the Hida was drawn to follow the words of the Ari, or the teachings of the Ari, and bidinan, we rule like the words of the Radbaz, David ibn Abi Zimra. Okay? Also, this same time period, David ibn Abi Zimra, in fact, was in exile from Spain, and from Spain went to Egypt, and from Egypt to Eretz Israel, later on towards the end of his life. And he wrote thousands of Tishubot al-Radbaz. And he writes, Shebechol makom, listen to this, in any case, any incident, any scenario, when there is a difference of opinion between the poskim and the mekubbalim, halacha keha poskim. The halacha is like the poskim and not like the mekubbalim. And therefore, since this is an issue of Kabbalah against poskim, whereas the mekubbalim are the ones who are saying not to make this beracha on these 2 days, because the Ari says so and the Hida follows him, we do not listen to the mekubbalim, rather we follow the poskim, and we do make the beracha, because it's poskim against mekubbalim, halacha ka poskim. Now, if that's the case, we really need to revamp our whole Sidur, do we not? Because most of our Sidur, the way we know it today, is based upon the Mekubalim. It's based upon the Ari and his student, Maharhu, Bihayim Vital, right? And his son, Bishlomo Vital, and the Hida, and Bihayim Palachi, and Rabbi Yosef Hayim, Ben Ishai. Our entire Sidur has to be wiped. But meanwhile, Bibo Sheikh Khalfona Kohen Mejerba used basically the same Sidur as well. So I have a problem with this statement, even though, yes, that is a statement that we know from our Hachamim, and we generally follow this statement of the Radbaz, but in actuality, they didn't really adhere to it at all times. Or maybe they weren't aware of all the changes that came into the Sidur, that crept in over time, which is more possible, I think. Okay, now we continue. Any questions to this point, or we're good? You go ahead. Whoever has a question, shoot. All right, I guess there's no questions. Now, the opinion not to make the beracha. החידה כתב בספרו קשר גודל, שדעת הארי שלא לברך שעה צדיק וסורקי, לא בתשעה באב ולא ביום הכיפורים. So the Hida comes straight out. He doesn't tell you Rambam. He tells you the Ari says so. Okay? So Kesher Godel is one of the Hida's more popular books. Okay? Especially among the masses. Very simple, easy book for everybody to access, to read, and to find, ways to annotate their Sidur. Okay? Based upon what the Hida had to say. And so the Hida says that the opinion of the Ari is not to make this beracha on these 2 days. Abraham al-Qada'i, Sefer Abraham. Very interesting Hacham, this Rabbi al-Qada'i, but we'll talk about it another time. His book was recently republished, and it's something that's constantly quoted by our Hachamim. Bet Obed. Bet Obed, as we know, is, the Sidur par excellence for the Sephardi Hacham from the point it was printed until recently, until maybe 50 years ago. V'chein pasag b'sefer Kaf Haim Palachi. Okay, B'Haim Palachi, Kaf Hayim also. It's a book like Keshet Goda, but with much more detail. Bechem Pasag B'Sefer Yefed Aleb, also from the Palachi family. Bechem Pasag B'Sefer Ben Ish Hai, and the Ben Ish Hai says the same thing. Gam Ba'al Eres Hayim Katab, B'Hayim Sittehon, and Ba'al Eres Hayim Katab, En Mibarchim B'Yom Kippurim Sha'a Sadiq Sorki. So now we have the Hida, we have the Chol Abraham, we have the Bet Obed, we have the Kaf Hayim Palachi, we have Yefed Aleb, we have the Ben Ish Hai, and Eres Hayim. 7 big names in the last 300 years. And these are all big names. The most popular reading books of the Hachamim, of the Talmidei Hachamim, and of the general person who's considered Yodei Sefer. Maran, lo bi'adato b'firush. Maran never expressed his opinion on this topic. But he wrote in a general rule. כל הברכות האלו, אם לא נתחייב באחת מהן, כגון שלא שמע על כל תרנגול, או שלא הלך, או לא לבש, או לא חגר, אומר אותה ברכה בלא הזכרת השם. What did Maran say? He gave a general rule on birkat shahar. Any of these berachot, if you were not obligated in it, for example, you did not hear the rooster, or you did not walk, or you did not get dressed, or you did not put on a belt, okay? Make the beracha without saying Shem Hashem, okay? בניתן להשיג מכך כי ביום הכיפורים ותשעה באב שהם נועדים בהם נעליים אין לברך ברכת שעה סדיק או sorki. And therefore we can deduce from this that on these days when we do not wear leather shoes, we do not make the beracha with Shem Malchut. So we say ברוכתה שעה סדיק או sorki. You would just say it like that. ולגבי רמה, and now what about Muram? What did Muram say? הרי שהוא הגיע. He added a gloss over here. He said ויש אומרים, אפילו לא תחייב בהן ברכותיהם. There's an opinion that even if you're not obligated in them, you still say them. דין הברכה דווקא על עצמו, because the ברכה is not specifically for yourself, אלא מברכין שהקדוש ברוך הוא ברא צורכי העולם. We are blessing God for creating all these needs and necessities in the world. וכן המנהג ואין לשנות. And this is the custom, this is the general practice, and you should not deviate from it. And in fact, that is what we do. Sephardim and Ashkenazim alike, this is the general practice. We say all of birkat shahar without thinking. We just say them. We rattle them off. Therefore, according to Moram, according to Moshe Esrish, you would have to make this beracha of sha'ar sadiq sorki even on those 2 days. Now we go to the Ginat Viradim. Ginat Viradim, be Abraham, Mordechai Levi, one of the greatest Hachamim of 17th century Cairo. كان بي أبراهام بن مردخاي الليفي ربا شل مصراي بمئة يدزاين كتاب بشيلوت شوت جنات فيراديم. And this also constantly quoted by Sephardim and Ashkenazim alike. They constantly quote the Ginat Viradim. شوت مصاتي كتوب على شم هرب وقاه إلهي مورين وهرب بيسحق لوريا أشكنازي. لا in other words the Hari. بركات شعاع صديق وسلكي إن موافد شعب آب لهم يكبرين يبريش هذا كل أسوب من عيادة السندان عاد كان شروع. Simple. That's what I see in the name of the Hari, that on these 2 days we do not make such a beracha because it's forbidden to wear our leather sandals. بين أشيب لو ما شعري قام يوم كبرين بشعب آب يشني عيادة السندان الحوضين. You know, we say, oh, the Hodeh, an ill person, he can wear it. Or a person, who's concerned about a scorpion, he can wear it. The answer, I'll hear none of this. No بري شو أنا شنو علاش محمد أونس لا حشيبك إلى بدون روح عظام إلى الحوضين شاري إلى الحوضين بين لهم سكر الأقراب أي حيدين محوضين شيء لهم سكر الأقراب بتنين هم بعيتان بدو عزيز بتريه مدرب بائن هو جريري بتروا با شافلو هم عصفان شعونين وسدان ما يبرخوا من خير شاب العالم الكريم شاري إلا هم الآيو وزبنا سدان مدرب با هم السعيدين شباب ودي أونس العبور عبد بريه خبير خبرات كسامي وبعين. I love it. He attacks them all. He says, what is this nonsense? All of us, all of Am Yisrael, all the same boat. We have to worry about those few possible individuals that are sick or that they have to pass through an area where there are scorpions. If anything, those guys, they're upset that they're not able to follow the law like the rest of us are. Why is the Rob following the Mi'ut? Why is the majority have to follow the minority? The minority, those few guys, they're the ones to be upset that they can't, do the law the way we're doing it. Not that we have to change our way of doing things for them. Makes no sense whatsoever. I don't buy it whatsoever. And how can they go and give shebach? How can they go and praise God? This guy has to put on his leather shoes to go walk through the scorpions. Make it You think this guy's really happy to praise God for such a thing? He's upset. He's suffering. Or the guy who's sick, who has to wear leather shoes because he's sick. He's suffering. He is not praising anybody. He's not saying any beracha of shebach. Impossible. Because they wish they didn't have to have this quote-unquote enjoyment and make such a beracha on such a day. So based upon the Ginat Veradim, we have to follow the practice of the majority of the world, the Jews of the world in this case. Okay, Ta'anit Yahid. Okay, and the guy is actually fasting on Shabbat, he would still have to follow, what the majority of the Jews are doing and make beracha on Besamim on Mosseri Shabbat. Even though, because he was mit'aneh, he doesn't get the neshama yetera, okay, but he has to follow the majority. Not the majority follows him, who's in the minority. شأنه علم عال بيوم كيبورين تابع آب أفعل بخير أنا وبريش شعار صديق وسوكي متعامد كتبنا بزين الإبرور أن according to Rabbi Mordechai, Rabbi Abraham, Halevin, Ginat Veradim, even these lone individuals that do have to wear shoes, they should not make the beracha either of Sha'ar Sali, because they're doing it out of onus, out of anything at all, and they have to follow the rest of the world that's not making the beracha. And obviously it doesn't follow like somebody who is in a position where they have to actually eat something, okay, because that's a different type of hana'ah, and he gets hana'ah of the taste, of the flavor, of the nourishment, so you have to make a beracha. And it's different because one is a beracha on the action, on the hana'ah, and over here it's a beracha of shebach. And beracha of shebach he wouldn't be saying. And since he is suffering with these issues, therefore not proper to give praise upon them. Beautiful sebara, in my opinion. Now, Governor B. Yahya ben Yosef Saleh, Hamnafone Maharis. Okay? So another one of the great Yemenite Hachamim. Gadol Hachmet Teman b'Me'ah Yudhet. One of the great Yemenite Hachamim in the 18th century. And he, in fact, helped bring back many Yemenites to the rulings of Harambam because they lost their path. And he writes in his responsa, Bi'ulat Sadiq, Mi she'usrach lin'ol min al b'yom ha'kippurim u'b'tisha b'av. Somebody who has to wear shoes on these days. Af al pi chen eno mebarech she'ah sadiq u'sorki. He does not make a beracha of she'ah sadiq u'sorki. Dihu gari bata rubba de'alma. He follows the rest of the world. Same thing like Rabbi Levi said. So the exact same sebara of the Ginat Veradim is what we're getting from Mahari Saleh. Okay. Now, Governor B. Yosef Hayim, the Ben Ish Hai himself, in his response to Rab Alim, Volume 1 writes, Umurim b'shofi libarech מכוח המנהג הפשוט פועלים בכל מקום שהאבל מברך ברכת שעה סליק וסורקי. Now you have a mourner. A mourner is not wearing shoes, but we instruct that mourner to make the beracha of שעה סליק וסורקי. Why? If he's not wearing shoes and he can't wear shoes, even though on Tisha B'Av and Kippur we don't make the beracha, because it's based upon the majority of the world. The majority of the world goes barefoot or without leather shoes. Okay? Since the majority of the people are in fact wearing shoes, the abed is in the minority, and the minority follows the majority, and he makes the beracha. So far we see two different schools of thought. Okay, what the school of thought of making the beracha seems to be an older school of thought, and the school of thought of not making the beracha seems to start with the Ari and those who follow the Ari, but they also have a very nice following, and you don't really have those that came out against them, at least from what we see here. Now, what about the North African customs? What he brings us now. Minhag Safon Africa. לגבי מנהג צפון אפריקה, הנה דעותיהם של כמה מחכמי מרוקו ומיוסעי חכמי מרוקו. Here's the opinions of certain Moroccan rabbis. Rabbi David Ammar, in his Tefillah David, who made Aliyah from Morocco to Jerusalem, together with Rabbi Hayim ben Attar, the Ora Hayim, he brings the opinion of the Baal Hayitur, Sarich Nebarech, and then he brings to contradict it the opinion of Rabbi Hayim Vital, Maharhu, in Nagid Saveh. And it brings the Bid David. And it brings the Knesset Gedolah, Rabbi Hayim ben Benisti, that we don't make the beracha on Yom Kippur. Who can maybe a da'at levush, v'da'at peri hadash, sheyesh lebarechotah. So the levush and the peri hadash, okay, both say to make the beracha. But he makes sure to note that the Bit David brushes aside their opinion. So he basically is of the opinion that we do not make the beracha. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Toledano, okay, I don't know much about this particular Rabbi Yehuda Toledano. There were a lot of them. כבוד מורה הרב יהודה טולדנו, המכונה רבי הדוס, בן העיר מקנס במאה י"ח, הגן בספר וזאת יהודה על דת הארי, העושה לברך שעה סליק וסוגים ומקורים. So this particular Rabbi Yehuda Toledano, from the city of Meknes in the 18th century, he defended the position of the Ari of not making the beracha on Kippur. And he says as such, אלו שפוסקים שיש לברך אותה טוענים כי אין אדם מברך אותה על הנעליים שהוא נועל בעצמו אלא על מנהג העולם. Those who say make the beracha, they are basing themselves on the opinion that, no, we're not saying for ourselves, we're talking about the general way of the world. Jews and non-Jews alike, people wear shoes. And we're giving Shebach to Borei Olam, praising God for them. And of course, a person needs to wear shoes. Let's say for a scorpion, he can wear it. So what does Rabbi Toledano add? But please, he's telling you, all of Am Yisrael, we're all forbidden for wearing shoes on this day. He basically doesn't look as minhag ha'olam as being minhag ha'olam, ha-Yehudi ve'eno Yehudi. We can't look at the minhag ha'olam, okay, the custom of the world to be of Jews and non-Jews alike. He looks at it as being only Jews, and since Jews are forbidden from wearing it, so that means that's the minhag of the olam for that day. Therefore, you cannot make the beracha on such a day. ובכל זאת מסכים כבוד מורנו הרב יהודה טולדנו שמי שנועל נעל של עור מחמת צנעת הקרב יברך שעשית sorki. But he's of the opinion that if you actually do have to wear it, you make the beracha on that day, differently than the ginat veradim. וכן האבל יברך אותה למרות שהוא אינו נועל סנדל שכן כל העולם נועלים סנדל ברכה היא על מנהג העולם. And he agrees with the Berish Hai that the mourner would also make such a beracha. Now we have Rabbi Yosef Berdugo, who also lived in Meknes in the 19th century. And he quoted something from Rabbi Yehuda Teodano, and he ruled like Rabbi Yehuda Teodano. Rabbi Shem Tov Gegin, one of our favorite Hachamim, okay, in his Keter Shem Tov, who many years ago we used to read from very, very often. In volume 6, page 349. Let's see what he has over here. Bottom of the page, Madua Nahagu Shelo Lebarech Sha'asa Li Ko Sorki Bibirkat Shahar. He doesn't even mention it as something of Sephardim or Ashkenazim or Sephardim of the West, of Sephardim of the East, saying, why don't we make the beracha? As if it's, commonly known. He doesn't even think about it otherwise. He tells you over here, back to Divrei Shalom ve'emet, and he takes it the same way, face value. He's talking about all of Am Yisrael, basically. Nobody makes this beracha. Then you have, finally, he brings you Rabbi Rafael Baruch Toledano, who's known for his famous Kisur Shulchan Aruch Sephardi. Okay? And Lebarech Betesha'a Be'av, Yom Kippurim Beracha Zo. Av Shino'el Min Ashel Lebadim, Ve'a'abel, Mibarech Sha'asel Kosaki, Ach She'olech Yahayev. Because even if you're wearing leather, cloth, material shoes on such a day, you do not make the beracha. And of course, a mourner would make the beracha. נראה שיעתיק את דברים מסידור בית עובד שכתב שעה צדיק וסוכי אין דברים לתשעה באב יכולים אף שלובש מנעל של הבדים והאבל מברך אף מהולך יחף וכן מנהג ההולכים אחר הגבות הארי. And he says that it seems that Rabbi Toledano, Rabbi Fa'il Baruch Toledano, copied the words of the Beit Obed. So bottom line is telling you, after all is said and done, there are two opinions. This is the reason for this. This is the reason for that. And we have a clear-cut minhag. We ourselves, we have a very clear minhag that we do not make the beracha. Obviously, we have the Hakaim that he quoted from the Hida onwards, but we have many other sources from all of our Sephardic countries that we do not make the beracha. There are very, very few sources of Jews, Sephardic Jews in Sephardic countries where we see that they do make the beracha. I think it was Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a custom of making the beracha, and it slowly eroded to a point where most people stopped making the beracha, but some continued to make the beracha. But other than that, it's a moot point. If you open up the mahzurim, all the mahzurim either don't have the beracha, or there's a very clear note that the custom, the practice is not to make the beracha of Sha'as Sadiq Sorki on Yom Kippurim. That they've started to reinstitute this beracha and put it into mahzurim now, based upon the ruling of Chacham Yosef. To me personally, it's troubling, it's disturbing. But the custom is not to say it, or we haven't said it for the last few hundred years, and based upon the ruling of Chacham Yosef, or it was Chacham Yosef's personal practice to make the beracha, something like that. But don't just put it in there without any note whatsoever. I think it's doing a disservice to people. I would even put it, on that level of what I would call ginevat da'at, where you're stealing knowledge from the individual. So, any comments on this particular issue?
Wow.
Beautiful job of explaining it.
Well, I didn't explain it. Rabbi Toledano explained it. I, gave my 2 bits here and there. But I'd like to hear, thoughts on it, or what, if any of you do say the beracha, when did you start saying it, or if you're saying it because you never knew otherwise, because you weren't taught the, minhag.
The Spanish Portuguese synagogue has it in there, but for some reason it has parentheses hanoten laev koach as the questionable beracha. Come across that beracha as being problematic?
I've never had, so Hanoten le'ayv koach is a different issue where it's a beracha that's not in the Talmud. And because of that, there is an opinion not to say it at all throughout the year, or if you are to say it without Shem Hashem. And in fact, that was the position of Rabbi Shalom Mesas. And he addresses that, I believe, in his Tibuot Shamish. Okay? But again, that's a beracha that seems really something that came in through the Mekubalim, and we say it based upon them and not upon anything else. And since the Spanish Portuguese have, for the most part, kept away from many Kabbalistic practices, this is also something that they have not done.
Are they the only community who kept away from the Kubalim?
Technically, yes. The Yemenite community, I would not say kept away, because the Yemenites had influence from the Kubalim. They also had their own Kubalim. And within the Yemenite community, they even had two different schools of thought, what they like to refer to as the Baladi and the Shami. The Baladi, we call it their form of Mustarabi, okay? And the Shami being those influenced by Sham. Sham being Greater Syria, which means Eretz Israel in this case. Okay, and so therefore they were more influenced by Sephardim. But the Yemenites are very, very steeped in Kabbalah. It's only the Darda'im, okay, the family of the grandfather of Rabbi Yosef Kafah, and all their followers really, made a major motion to remove themselves from Kabbalah. So even they had a lot of different kind of Kabbalistic influence. But as far as the other Sephardic communities throughout North Africa, throughout the Levant, they were all heavily, heavily influenced by Bekubalim. I would say even the Sephardic communities of Italy were also very influenced by Kabbalah, to a lesser extent than the Middle East, but definitely heavily influenced, and definitely through the actions or through the visits of the Shadarim, the Shiluhat Rabbanan, that came from the Arba'a Rasot, from Yerushalayim, Hebron, Tiberias, Safed, to visit in Livorno, in Modena, in Pisa, in Venezia. They would generally visit those countries, those cities in Italy very, very often, especially in the 1700s, and they brought a lot of influence over there. So yeah, I would say it's only the Spanish Portuguese, London and Amsterdam, and then obviously, or the Caribbean islands and New York later on, who had less of an influence from the Kabbalah.
Very interesting.
What else?
I wanted to ask, since these berachot are said privately, right, not in synagogue, can't one say that I can look at any of these berachot, and since I'm not doing them, I can omit them if it doesn't affect me? Aren't all of these berachot subject to our own interpretation, besides She'asali Kotzar Achai? Because they're not said out loud. And hence, She'asani Isha, She'asani Kirtzono, Shemu Malchut, without Shemu Malchut. So isn't there a built-in subjectivity to these berachot, which would allow all of them to be there, and then you and I and all of us to say, well, Moreno, you've convinced me. I'm not going to say Asali Kotzar Achai. But what about Zokef Kifufim? What about Matir Asurim? It doesn't apply anymore.
Well, it all depends on how you interpret the beracha, I guess. But for the most part, the Hakamim have interpreted the berachot for us. That's number one. Number two, the point that you're saying that the berachot are not said publicly. That's a different issue. maybe they should be said publicly. And based upon many of the sources, they used to be said publicly, even in Spain.
Yeah.
You know, I hear a yeah over there. So in Turkey, they still say them publicly.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I know Ashkenazim do it though.
Okay.
I don't think in Turkey, from what I remember, that they do it publicly.
All right. So based upon many of the poskim, I don't think maybe the late Rishonim, and definitely earlier Harurim, you see that these berachot were definitely said publicly. The question is, when did they move into the realm of being said privately? And that, I think, may have also come about with the Ari. I'd have to double check.
Very interesting.
Okay,
Wow.
I would have to double check that. I'm not positive, but that shouldn't be too hard to locate.
Because if you're saying it in the synagogue, it's all the more important, you know, because it's in public.
It's in public. It's very important, and it gives people a chance to answer these amenim out loud instead of flying through these berachot. Like I said earlier, for the most part, I don't think I'm mistaken in saying that most of us, myself included, fly through these berachot on a daily basis without giving it much thought. Okay, we may say it while taking a walk to Knis, without even opening the siddur for. Who's thinking? But if the Hazan stands up and makes the beracha, Baruch atah Adonai, and everybody Baruch Hu Shemo, Amen. It changes it. It automatically becomes real shebach.
Yeah.
You're really praising God at this point. You crown Yisrael with glory. It's an amazing beracha. Do we stop and think about it? I think most of us do not. You know, so let's put it this way. Let's say one was to open up their own congregation today, and they had carte blanche to do what they want, but within the realm of what we have, without, changing things, without taking our siddur and, basically playing with it so you end up with a conservative or reform siddur. We stick with our siddur the way we know it. We stick with our minhagim the way we know it, but we enhance it. Wouldn't it be nice to bring back such a custom of birkat shahar are said b'sibur? Very possible. Now,
Joey, this is the perfect time to do that because of Corona. We have all these minyanim. Should open up another minyan.
Do we have minyanim or do we have people playing b'yahid?
That too.
Okay. I personally am very, very uncomfortable with what is called a Zoom minyan. Okay. Like I said before, I call it a zoo. It's not a minyan. I think it's a big mess. I think if you have an actual minyan, physical minyan of 10 people, and then other people zoom into it, that I could easily swallow. Still not a fan, but I could easily swallow it. But having 10 people in remote locations come together on their, electronic devices, it's not a minyan. It's not. It just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't make any sense at all, according to my understanding of the halachic requirements. I think the physical bodies really need to be there together. It's very, very important. And as much as technology helps us to connect with one another, it doesn't do it the same way as when you're in the same room. There is a major difference in it. Okay? Because in other words, we're all sitting here right now, okay? But we're not sitting here right now. El Hadif has this dead picture of him on the screen the whole time. Who knows what he's doing? Okay? He could be taking a nap right now. Or somebody has no picture up there at all. Or somebody put their picture up or has a background up and they walked away to go get a cup of water. It could be, it's not the same. It's not like, imagine you're in a board meeting. Everybody's around, this beautiful mahogany desk, in this room. Nobody dares get up and walk out. And nobody's going to fall asleep and nobody's going to start playing with their phone. So it's not the same. It's really not the same thing. When you all gather together and you're counting upon one another, I just don't see it as being the same thing. But I digress. This has nothing to do with what we're supposed to be talking about right now. So I just want to touch quickly upon the other, if nobody has anything else to say about this topic of sorki, I just want to touch quickly upon the Vihurahum and starting the Arbit for Yom Kippurim without any sort of Mizmor or Hasikadish. That's very important. Now, it seems like Barry left us, correct? Yeah, it looks like Barry's not here, but Nisim is here. Okay? So, Nisim. You with me, Nisim?
I'm with you.
So, have you ever prayed with Iraqis on Yom Kippur?
No.
No. Okay, so here's my problem. The entire Sephardic world, as I said in the introduction, I believe you were here in the introduction, throughout the year, weeknights, Shabbat, holidays, we have either Pesukim or a Mizmor, followed by Hasikadish, followed by Vihurahum, and Barechu. On Kippur, we omit the Pesukim and or Mizmor, we omit Hasikadish, and we start from Vihurahum. The Iraqis, okay, and mainly with the advent of Rabbi Yosef Hayim and his rulings, they decided to change that. And they actually, say Pesukim and Hasikadish. And I think it's completely and utterly wrong. It's a slap in the face to all those that preceded them. It's a slap in the face to all the other Sephardi communities. And I don't know why they've done such a thing. And I was really hoping I would hear from either you or Barry, something about this, or, if you've ever come across it or any points about it.
I could look at my father's Siddur, but you probably have the Iraqi Siddur. I'm sure it says.
Your father's going to have either a Salah Yaqub Mansour book or a Yishaq Baqqal book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't really do much for any of us.
No, it doesn't answer the question. Right.
Because that just tells me what the Iraqis published for all Sephardim in Israel so it can mess them all up. That's all it really tells me. Okay? And I know what it says. They're going to tell you, these are the Pesukim that the Iraqis say. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into the Kaddish. So, I just don't get it.
Do you think that changed with the Ben Ish Chai, basically?
Yeah, basically. Or his time period.
We don't have anything from before then? Or we do?
We don't have what? I'm sorry, say that again?
You're saying it changed? He made that change?
I would say let's say he instituted the change. I'm not saying he made the change, okay, but he's more of he instituted the change. A lot of things he instituted either because he actively instituted them or because he said this is what should be done. And people decided to follow him. Now, the question is, how did this change come about to influence not only the Jews of Iraq, but many Jews throughout Israel, and more specifically Jerusalem? Now, it's not limited to the Ben Ish Hai. I will admit it, it's not limited to the Ben Ish Hai. There are other sources, and not all Iraqi sources, but the Iraqi sources are definitely a prevalent part of it all. So I was really... Yeah, go ahead, please.
Why don't we have a mizmor for Yom Kippur? Like, why didn't we have one before this change?
So that's a good question too. The question really seems to go back to, did anybody ever say a mizmor before anything, or was the addition of a mizmor something that came later on? Okay. In other words, looking at earlier sources, it would seem that Arbit always started with Barechu, not with Hasi Kaddish.
Wow.
You understand what I'm saying?
The Hasi Kaddish was a later addition.
The Hasi Kaddish is a later addition. The Hasi Kaddish being said because you're saying a mizmor,
Right,
or pesukim, one or the other. Or you're saying a mizmor, so you could say Hasi Kaddish. In any case, the prayer never had these things. Okay? So, if you want to give me a minute, I'm going to send you a picture of 2 pages, and we'll see if this does anything for us at all. If not, then we'll just drop it and call it a night. Okay? Give me a second. All right. So this is from a book called Seder Aboda. We read from Seder Aboda before. This is Rabbi Moshe Suisa, who is a good friend of our friend Sam Cohen, and he is a army rabbi in Israel as well. I forgot his exact title, if he's a lieutenant or a general, but very, very interesting young fellow. And young, because I think he's only in his 30s, and he's very well read, and he's written quite a bit. So if you see on the top of the page, he writes over here, פותחים ערבית בפסוק והוא רחום יכפר עוון אף מחל יום הכיפורים בשבת ואחר כך אומר החזן ברכו ואין מנהגינו לומר חסי קדיש לפניו. And this is something that holds true for all Sephardim, except again for the Iraqis and or the Mekubalim. So let's see what he says. You all have this page? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Okay. So on the bottom of the page, كف حيط. كان كتاب بسيدر رب عمرام قاون متحيتي عشان سبور ولا حم يخبر عفون عاد هبوريس وكشهم عليهم بخين كتاب محصول فطري وسفر عيتون وسفر منهي وشبور يالديك يتباهي يروش بيوما بقدر مين من ربوتين الشونين بخيم بسيدر اليوم كتاب من حيدة حزان بورحهم شعاس اللي خذ كاشي يخبر عفون بدو يشهيد فحكا خمرين باريخو بخيم بشر السبور كتاب دومي بيقول رحوم من الكيبور بآب شئين أمرين بيقول رحوم بعربين شد الشباب يوم توب كوال كتابها لاب سيده يوم لشاني ليل كيبور شعاس اللي خالك بشحان قابوة كتاب شكينا من هاج بخين بيها قاون بحيم فلاتشي بحييم كان من هاج حارة ميلاد كان ندريه بحلال سبتراد هيخات تكف فتحيل شدي يسيبوه بيقول رحوم وباريخوه بتلفة الأربيت. Okay, so now all these sources all say that we start Arbit of the Kippur with Vehurahum, and some of them added that even though we wouldn't normally say Vehurahum, since this is Kippur, if we're not going to say okay, he was merciful and he atones for our transgressions. If we're not going to say Kippur, what are we going to say it? So obviously it's befitting, even though we would normally say it, let's say, on any holiday or on a Shabbat, or especially not on a holiday that falls on Shabbat, but in this case of Kippur and even Kippur that falls on Shabbat, we say Vehurahim. And this is according to all these various sources. Then he writes, Ve'af, Shebeben Ish Hai Katab, تأفلوا بيوم كيبوريم شحال بحوض يورو باسوق زي بتفاد عربيت كده يتاب زوه ركادوش كبه شبات بخوش كيم بيوم كيبوريم شبفداي إنه إلا درا بشعر يمين توبيم. So first thing is the Ben Ish Hai comes out again saying Vehurahum. Okay? وميكون مكون كمان مسير الشقاف ببغداد أتريد الأمور لهكو دوبار Vehurahum بعبريش الكيبور يواب شل شوال زبحي سيدي. Even so, and even though the Ben Ish Hai is saying this, if we look at the Zibhei Sedek, in other words, the teacher, okay, or one of the teachers of the Ben Ish Hai, because it wasn't really his teacher, it was one of the people that the Ben Ish Hai learned from, who was older than the Ben Ish Hai, be Abdullah Sumech, in Zibhei Sedek, says no. In Baghdad, we say Vehurahum. In other words, he's giving you testimony of what was the practice that before the influence of Rabbi Yosef Hayim. Okay? ومدبري هرب ذم حييم وربوتين وريشوريم سكين العين بوغار دي إنهم محسي كديج ولا كيبور. And based upon what we see from Yahayim Palachi, there's no حسي كديج. إنه بين بوغار حول وباريخون فنيم عربيت. بخير بوغار بهدية بماش كتاب هرب ذم حييم عود صريخ لدعا لما نشتنا يمكورين بكودة ودشاناشي إنه ورين بوغات حالات في العربيت شم كديم متحليم بباريخون إباد هذو كمل مشمولين السيد بشريد دافيد هشيخين يوم كيبورين معنينيه فيدوي بتشوبه بخيوسي. We can open up Tehillim, and we can find many Mizmorim that we could say that have to do with the concept of Kippur and Teshuvah and things like that. So why not say Mizmor and then say Hasi Kaddish like we normally would? Beshaya, Faya, Kabul, the Gua is a Mizmor, the Bar, the Kaddish. It would be inappropriate to establish a Mizmor to say Kaddish. Bishu would be Maharab, taking a Siyoch, Katab, Dechena with Asod, and the Dela Manani, with Pila Asod, Hadasha, Ba'arif, the one Mizmor. Because yes, even though the war Hacharim who said, yeah, it makes sense to do that, and I thought about doing things, it's not my place to come and establish such new things. Me'ahar shekama gedolei Yisrael dor ahar dor lum yihu biyadam ad kan devarav. Because there's so many great Hacharim, generation after generation that saw this and did not come to change it. Who am I to come and change it? Okay, and the case of the something there's no Kaddish. Next page. And the Bodaniel, he be a single field in Alexander, he never suffered upon the Praha, or just a woman who is station with Tefa, the Royal Kaddish. With the Arbit, the end of Kola, you should be home, or a home, or a food, and like whatever, see how the back tells you. When you come to that, he tells you say a share, followed by Hasi Kaddish. When it comes to Arbit, he tells you say the home and Barefu, and people answer to the Khalam and he continues with the Barafa. قارين وقامد براف بالحاشا وابتدى تهديه على حرف قديش العربيت شو متحين بياده ورحوم إنه ومن قديش there's no قديش إن عربيت بخير بسات لهجي هرما بعدها بالعلام إنه قديش بلوته إلا لفناف مش لخير متحين عربيت بلو قديش. Okay? According to this, the Ashkenazim do not say Kaddish before Arbit. Is that correct? Those of you who follow the Ashkenazim, you know the Ashkenazim do not say Kaddish before Arbit. That's following the halacha for the Harambam. Very simple. Any time of the year. وكاف حييم هيبي بشها أري. The Yisrael also subsequent to Shehem Adonais and Amman, so now the Ari is one who's established saying the three Pesukim, otherwise the man was Yodam Uda Baghdad Shemeth and Kurea, and then you say Kaddish, and then you say Vehurahum, and you say Barechum. And that's the Minhag of Beit El, the famous yeshiva of the Mekubalim in Yerushalayim, and the Minhag of Yerushalayim. The Hain Kumar, the Hain Shomrit Pesukim, Kodem Arbit, Kedid Omar Hasi Kaddish. And we say things before Arbit in order to establish and enable us to say Kaddish. وبحجيم برشاء حداشيم بليل شباتوت يكونوا له مزمور تهليم كده في الله. And on Shabbat and holidays they established a specific mizmor beforehand. אבל לא כן בערב כיפור, but not so כיפור, לא תקנו שום מזמור, קודם התפילה. They did not establish any mizmor before the prayers. ולאחי لا אמינה חסי קדיש. They did not establish mizmor, therefore there is no חסי קדיש. They only קדיש אלא לאחר תהילה. They will only say קדיש after the mizmor. והנה סדר חמד כתב, ויש את מוע אמי אין אומרים חסי קדיש קודם ערבית לכיפור, ואם משום שאין אומרים מזמורים כבשאר הלילות, הוא גופת השעה. למה לא תקנו לומר מזמור אחריו ולכשרה, ועוד יש להקשות שערים מנהגים שמחזירים ספר תורה לאחד ואומרים מזמור דוד. But here, we take out the Torah, we put it back, we take back the Torah, we say מזמור דוד, Aboda Adonai Bnei Elim. So we have a mizmor, you know, and we say, then we say Shuvah L'Monach, so we can say Kaddish. What's the problem? Well, so go according to the Seder Hamid, okay, it'd be Haskell de Silva. No, I'm going to say Haskell Medini. You should technically then say Hasi Kaddish. Well, be proper to say Kaddish. And now when I have returned to Israel, remember he left Israel for a long time. He was living in Bukhara. He became their rabbi over there, teaching Torah over there to them and bringing them back to the ways of Torah. And then he went back to Israel. He went to Hebron. ראיתי בעיר הקודש חברון, שאמרו חסי קדיש, וגם והוא רחום ברכוי. ואמרו שכן נהוגים בחלק הקדוש בית ירושלים. When I turned to Hebron, I saw the minhag here in Hebron has changed, and they now are saying Kaddish before Vehu Rahum. And they said that they're following the custom of the Yeshiva and the Mekubalim of Bet El in Yerushalayim. וכן הביא בספר חזון עובדיה על ימים נוראים, שקודם תפילת ערבית של ליל כיפור אומרים חסי קדיש ומשהו ברחום. So now you look, the family of Acham Yosef now has also changed the minhag, not only of Yeshivat Bet El, but now of all of Yerushalayim, okay, to now say Hasi Kaddish before Vehu Rahum. Ulam, Besefer Kedesh Shem Tov, what does our friend Bishem Tov Gagin tell us? מבואה, שכן נהגו כל ספרים לכיפור לומר והוא רחום להשמיד חסי קדיש לפניו. Tells us clearly the custom of all Sephardim, Eastern and Western, to omit Hasi Kaddish and only start from והוא רחום. מלבד ערי בבל, שהיו עושים להפך, except for the cities of Babylon, okay, of Iraq, who do the opposite. מדלגים על והוא רחום, they omit והוא רחום, Kaddish, and they say Kaddish. Maybe all the Kedesh Shem Tov, and later on Kedesh Shem Tov brings more and says Shekina Minhag B'Yisrael. וכן בספר טבעי עם כתב, שכן מנהג ספרדים בכל מקום שמותיהם להתחיל ערבי פסוק ורחום לקדיש. And טבעי ערבי אברהם אבו רביע tells us the minhag is in minhag of Yerushalayim, והוא רחום and no Kaddish. And וכתב מחזור אבותינו ליום כיפור, it's a famous Moroccan מחזור by Rabbi Meir Atiyah, who recently passed away about a year ago or so. There's no Hasi Kaddish on Leil Kippur. וכן הוא בא במנהגים עושה בספר זכור ברית אבות, מנהגים אבות, וכן בתוניס נהגו לומר פסוק והוא רחום בכיפור, כמו שכתב בספר עלי הדס. And so this is the custom of all the Sephardim except for the Babylonians who omitted והוא רחום and they say this Hasi Kaddish. The only thing I will add, okay, which he didn't mention over here, it does seem that there was an ancient minhag of the Mustarabi community of Aleppo to in fact say Kaddish, Hasi Kaddish, before the Vehu Rahum. And that minhag though was basically done away with by the Sephardim. So that custom no longer exists. So even though I'm telling you that Ben Ish Hai established it, if you will, or implementing it, or he recommended it,
or maybe reinstated it.
Excuse me. It's not that it never existed before, but by the time of the Ben Ish Hai, it was not something that was done or known of. most probably. But it is possible that it was brought to the Yeshiva Bet El of the Mekubalim by none other than the famous Mekubal Rabbi Hayim Shaul Dweck, who was a big Mekubal from Halab, who moved Beir Aliyah and became the head of the Yeshiva of Mekubalim. It's possible that he instituted it over there. I haven't done enough research yet to find out. In any case, the Ben Ish Hai in this issue seems to have been influenced by his friend, Rabbi Eliyahu Menni, who was originally from Baghdad and moved to Hebron, and he became the chief rabbi of Hebron, and he was also a big Mekubal, and he changed a number of minhagim of Hebron. And the Ben Ish Hai would constantly pen letters to Rabbi Eliyahu Menni to find out minhagim of the Mekubalim of Bet El. And so it's very possible that this is something that started in later days. Later days, I'm saying, let's say, maybe from 1870 on, and possibly even a little bit later, through the auspices of either Rabbi Haim Shaul Dweck, I have to double check what year he made Aliyah, through Rabbi Eliyahu Menni. It could have been something that the Mekubalim in Bet El were doing before and Rabbi Eliyahu Menni picked on. It could have been something that Rabbi Eliyahu Menni already instituted back in Baghdad or taught in Baghdad, brought it with him to Hebron. Once in Hebron, sent back message to Rabbi Yosef Hayim, I've been able to institute it over here, you could now institute it over there. But it definitely has something to do between these two Baghdadians more than with the Halabi Dweck. But it's definitely not something that existed before. I just wanted to put it out there, let everybody know that this is something that, and once again, the Baghdadians are doing to us again through the Rabbi Awodeh Yosef family, another group of Baghdadians. So, Nisim, I love you, but when the Baghdadians come in to change all, Sephardim, it bothers me. It just, pet peeve that I have.
Well, you just said that it might have been a custom even before.
I know what I said, but it was done away with. That custom was gone. And it doesn't seem to have been the custom of, of the Jewish world at large. It seemed to be a very peculiar issue that existed among the Mustarab of Halab, because it doesn't even go hand in hand with Harambam, who tells you throughout the year, which means including Shabbatot and Yemim Tovim, that Hasi Kaddish is not said before Arbit. So that's why I'm telling you it's a very oddball item. That's why I'm trying to point it out. Okay? I'm not coming to attack a particular group. Okay? But I'm saying something like this bothers me. Now, I need to check also the Italian works. I haven't checked what's called the Sidur of the Romaniot, okay, or Sidur Minhag Bnei Roma, to see what they do, if they have anything like this, as well as something called Ahabat Kadmonim. Ahabat Kadmonim was an ancient manuscript sidur of what they call the Toshabim. The Toshabim were called the Moroccan equivalent to the Mustarabim, and these Toshabim, the ancient Jews that lived in Fez, Morocco, prior to any Spanish influence. So bits and pieces of this Ahabat Kadmonim still exist, and it would be interesting to see if there's anything about it over there. But the way we know it today amongst the Sephardim is that Hasi Kaddish is not said, but V'hu Rahum is said. And that only through the influence of the Baghdadians in Yerushalayim, among the Mekubalim, and then it spread and it's continuing to spread, that's how this custom is changing. That's all I want to, put out there so people are aware of it, because, the way the world is changing, we could all be in Yerushalayim very soon. And then,
Hopefully.
yes, hopefully. But what's our minhag? Why is the minhag different over here? What's going on? How come? And constantly, as young men and women from our community go to Israel every year, for a year of study or 2 years of study, and they are, put face to face with different things that are going on. And from time to time, I'll get a question, or my friend in Israel, Joey Harari, will get a question, because, I remember this, or my mahzor says this, and over here they're doing this, and they're doing that. Are we wrong? Are they wrong? How come and how come? So people do need to be made aware of these things, even though they may seem, petty. These are not petty issues. These are issues that Hachamim have obviously written about, and that's why I like to bring them to the forefront. That's basically it for tonight. I don't have much more to say. Maybe I spoke a little too much. But that's just me. What can I tell you? Nassim, I love you anyway. You know that.
Of course. I love you too, Joe. I'm going to go check my father's siddur tomorrow. I'll let you know.
No, you don't have to let me know. I know exactly what it says. Trust me, I know. I could pull one out off the shelf. I know what they say. But if you see something differently, yes, then definitely let me know.
I'll let you know.
Rabbi Kasola, if I have a chance to look into your question about the Haftarah, I'm definitely going to look into it. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance, but I still love the question. I think it's definitely worthy of study to try to understand the exact connection of these Haftarot over here. And I'm sure it's something that we could easily find if we spend a little time on it. And we will, God willing. God willing. Anyway, everybody, I'd like to wish you a great evening. School Shem Labot.
Baruch.
Oh, David Elhanef, you woke up.
Baruch.
You have any questions for us, David?
Gemara Chatima Tova.